The night my father slid a stapled invoice across the dinner table, he looked at me the way landlords look at tenants who are already 3 months behind. Not like a father. Not even like a man who remembered teaching me to ride a bicycle in that same driveway. He looked at me like a problem he had finally found a way to solve. $15,000, he said. Back rent. Due immediately. My mother raised her wine glass. My sister laughed and started typing on her phone. My uncle, who had shown up uninvited but never missed an opportunity to watch someone else be humiliated, nodded slowly and said the words I will never forget. Tough love is the only thing freeloaders understand. I did not scream. I did not cry. I picked up the invoice, looked at the bottom of the page, and noticed something that changed everything. A timestamp from a local print shop. That document had been printed 13 days earlier, before I had moved a single box back into that house. They had not reacted to my return. They had planned it. They had set the table, invited an audience, rehearsed their lines, and waited for me to sit down so they could turn a family dinner into an ambush.
Have you ever looked around a room and realized the people in it had spent weeks preparing to break you? My name is Olivia. I was 29 years old that night, and what happened over the following weeks became the clearest lesson I have ever received about dignity, leverage, and what justice after 50 years of family silence actually looks like when it finally arrives. To understand what I did next, you need to understand what I had already done for that family for years, quietly, without recognition, and without a single word of gratitude. When I was 16, my father's contracting business came within 3 weeks of losing our home. He had underbid 2 large jobs and was being sued over defective materials from a supplier. My parents were terrified, though they would never have admitted it to me directly. So I did what I thought love required. I sold my laptop, the one I needed for school, and the camera I had spent 2 summers saving to buy. I told my friends it had been stolen. I handed the money to my mother in a grocery store parking lot so my father would not feel the shame of accepting it from his own child. They never mentioned it again. Not once.
Not when they talked about sacrifice. Not when they spoke about how hard they had worked to keep the family together. In their version of our history, only parents knew how to bleed for a family. Over the years, I sent money after a hail settlement bonus to help cover delinquent property taxes. I put an emergency furnace replacement on my own credit card one winter because my mother called crying and promised they would pay me back. 3 New Years came and went. They never did. I liquidated a small investment account during the pandemic slowdown to help keep their mortgage current. I had not been the burden of that household. I had been the invisible reserve tank they drained quietly every time their pride was about to run empty. And now, with a printed invoice and a 13% monthly interest rate, they were asking me to pay for the privilege of having done all of it. Have you ever added up everything you gave to the people who were supposed to protect you and realized the number was larger than anything they ever asked themselves to carry? I stood up from that table without raising my voice. I took the invoice with me. My father told me to sit down. I told him he was done.
My mother said that if I walked out that night, I should not expect to come back and pretend nothing had happened. I almost laughed. The pretending had all been theirs. Before I left, I walked past the family portrait in the hallway. Someone had drawn a red X through my face in dry erase marker. Not permanent, but deliberate. Temporary cruelty is still cruelty. I slept in my car that first night. Then I got a week at an extended stay hotel on points I had saved for a vacation I never took. And the next morning, I called my oldest friend, a woman who worked in compliance for a regional credit union and who had never once softened an ugly fact to make me feel better. She listened to everything. Then she said 7 words that reorganized how I thought about the entire situation. Stop treating this like a family misunderstanding. She was right. I had been using the language of pain with people who had been using the language of strategy. She slid a napkin across the diner table and said, "Start writing down every dollar." So I did. The laptop at 16, the property taxes, the furnace, the pandemic mortgage payment, the utility catch-up transfers. Every amount I could prove with a bank statement, a screenshot, or a text message. The total came to just over $18,000. $3,000 more than the fake debt they had invented for me. My friend looked at the number and said, "Funny."
Then she told me exactly what to do. Do not rush back in to defend yourself. People who enjoy control always get careless when they believe they have already won. 6 days later, I sent my father one short message. Tomorrow, 7 in the evening, kitchen. Have everyone there. He replied in under a minute. Good. Bring your first payment. They still thought they were running the meeting. I walked into that house the next night in my work clothes. Navy slacks, white blouse, my commercial insurance adjuster badge clipped to my waistband. I wanted them to see exactly what they had spent years calling worthless. My father sat at the head of the table, my mother beside him, my sister across from me, wearing the expression of someone who expects an apology, my uncle in the corner, righteous as ever. My father extended his hand. Envelope, he said. I set down a folder instead. For the next 10 minutes, I did not raise my voice once. I laid out transfer receipts, dated screenshots, bank statements, and message confirmations. I showed them the property tax payment from 4 years ago, attached to my mother's own reply. We will never forget this. Do not tell your father yet. I showed them the furnace charge, the utility transfers, the check I wrote during the pandemic slowdown. Then I placed the final page at the center of the table. My own spreadsheet, listing every dollar I had contributed to that household over 7 years. Grand total, $18,240. My father tried anger before he tried denial. He called it manipulative. I told him what was manipulative was printing a false debt before I had even moved back in. His eyes went straight to the timestamp at the bottom of his own invoice, sitting there on the table like a confession he had signed himself. I slid 2 typed copies across to my parents. A simple acknowledgement. Dates, amounts. Recognition that the $15,000 rent claim had no lease basis and no prior written agreement. My mother said I could not force my parents to sign something like that. I told her I was not forcing anything.
I was forcing reality into the room. After a long silence, my mother signed first. My father signed because he believed it would end the humiliation faster. It did not. I placed the pages back in my folder, stood up, and walked toward the door. My uncle asked what happened now. I looked at all 4 of them and said, "Now you live with what you tried to do." 1 week later, at 1:30 in the morning, my phone began ringing. It was my sister, breathless and panicked. My mother had opened certified mail, a final default notice, a county escrow issue, accelerated foreclosure proceedings if nothing was cured immediately. My father, the man who had printed a fake invoice to shake me down for $15,000, was now 3 weeks from losing the house he had tried to use against me. When I drove over and read the documents, I understood immediately what had actually been happening beneath all of their grandstanding. Their finances had been quietly collapsing for months, and buried inside the paperwork was one detail that changed everything.
They had hidden nearly $20,000 in a separate account, not to save the house, not to cover the taxes, but to fund my sister's move to a new city. Money for the favorite child, not the mortgage, not the roof, her. Whatever warmth was left in me toward them went still at that moment. I told them I would look at the documents. I told them I would contact the lender, but I also told them clearly, if I found one more lie, I was done. They nodded too quickly. Fear makes compliance look almost like respect. I spent the following week being the only responsible adult in the room. By day, I worked my actual job, reviewing commercial insurance claims. By night, I organized their financial wreckage into language a lender would take seriously. I negotiated a revised reinstatement agreement with strict conditions. 1 missed deadline, 1 wrong payment method, and the file would snap straight back toward foreclosure. My parents heard that and felt hope. I heard it as a final warning, because I knew them. They did not change under pressure. They only performed change long enough to escape consequences. The first payment under the new agreement came due.
I reminded my father twice. He waved me off both times and mailed a personal check instead of the certified funds the lender required. He sent it late. The account triggered review. And because the file was under strict reinstatement conditions, review meant real danger. I said nothing. I went to work. I let the lender's notification arrive on its own. Cure defect. Agreement at risk. Possible termination pending formal notice. 2 weeks later, it was over. The reinstatement terms had been breached. The lender moved forward. And 30 days after that, I stood across the street and watched a sheriff's notice being fixed to the front door of the house where I had grown up. My parents called everyone they knew and said I had abandoned them during a financial crisis. I did not post a dramatic response. I did not argue feelings with people who only understood leverage. I uploaded one calm, time-stamped statement to a private community group, along with 3 attachments. The fake invoice showing it had been printed before I moved in. The signed acknowledgement of every dollar I had contributed to that household.
And selected audio from the dinner where my father admitted in his own words that the invoice was false and the pressure campaign had been intentional. One sentence at the top. I am sharing this because I will not carry a false story for people who built one out of me. The truth moved on its own after that. Before I left that house for the last time, I stopped in the hallway. Someone had wiped the dry erase marker off my face in the family portrait. Too late. Some stains do not stay on photographs. They stay in people. Here is what this story taught me, and what I want to leave with you. Blood does not excuse exploitation. A home is not sacred simply because you grew up in it. For years, I believed that being good meant absorbing the damage quietly, paying the bill, and keeping the peace so everyone else could keep pretending the family was something it was not. I was wrong. Protecting your peace is not cruelty. Refusing to finance your own humiliation is not selfishness. Documenting the truth is not revenge. It is simply choosing not to carry a burden but was never yours to begin with. Financial independence is not just a number in an account.
It is the ability to walk out of a room where someone is trying to own you and know with certainty that you will be all right. Legal knowledge is not paranoia. It is the difference between being silenced by a false story and being the one who finally tells the real one. The most powerful thing a woman can do after years of being treated like a resource is to stop performing gratitude for the people who were supposed to love her freely. Justice after years of silence does not always look like a courtroom. Sometimes it looks like a folder placed quietly on a dinner table. Sometimes it looks like a lender's notification arriving on its own schedule. And sometimes it looks like a woman walking out of a door for the last time, knowing she does not owe anyone an explanation for finally choosing herself. If the people who were supposed to protect you tried to turn your love into a debt, you already know the answer. You have always known it. The only question left is whether you are ready to stop paying.